I was willing to go to jail if this judge was going to throw me in jail, but the whole world would have to see what he was doing.
Was the Biden Justice Department weaponized against you and your family?
100% the Biden administration had weaponized the Justice Department against us.
This memo is from Health and Human Services, the Office of Civil Rights, and it's their notice and guidance on gender-affirming care.
The message from this memo is that anyone who interferes with the administration of quote-unquote gender-affirming care is going to become a target of the federal government.
This memo was a green light by the Biden administration to prosecutors.
I'd like you to walk us through this schedule from Texas Children's Hospital. I'm looking at the ages here, 15, 13, 12, 14, 12, 11.
I spent a lot of time taking care of these sick kids at Texas Children's Hospital. But in the same operating rooms, I find out that they're taking perfectly healthy children, right? Inserting medications into their body, putting them down this road to turn them into chronic medical patients.
The first indictment is May of 2024. The second indictment is October. The third indictment is November.
This is absolutely speaking to the fact that this prosecution, they were trying any way that they could to manufacture an indictment out of non-existent law.
They were going to do anything possible to make me pay for what I did.
The allegation is that you violated patient privacy. Yet when I read the indictment, the Justice Department identifies patients with their initials. So who's violating patient privacy here?
I think there's a strong argument to make that it was the DOJ.
Was X a lifeline?
First of all, there's no whistleblowing without X. The only reason that I blew the whistle is because I believed that people would hear this story. It was because they were trying to crush us that we worked so hard to let them not crush us.
Tell us about that moment when you learned the criminal prosecution was over.
To know that it's finally over, that Eitan was safe and that he was going to be with us, for the next several years, I think was just an indescribable relief.
It's one of those moments like when you hear that, your wife is pregnant for the first time, or you get bad news, from, someone in your family is hurt, right? It's that moment that you'll always remember where you were.
On January 24th, 2 years of injustice came to an end for Dr. Eitan Haim, the Texas Children's Hospital whistleblower who went public about its gender-affirming care for minors. Dr. Haim was accused of violating patient privacy laws by the Biden Justice Department. We spoke exclusively to Dr. Haim and his wife in Washington, D.C., just days after the charges were dropped.
She kind of yelled my name, and I knew it was either going to be really good or really bad. And she comes into the room, and I could see it on her face that the case was dismissed. It was signed by the judge. I said, it's over. It's over. I love you. And I gave her a hug. I gave her a kiss. We just held each other for a long time, and so much we had gone through at that moment.
Were there tears?
Of course. It's indescribable because you achieve so much. You go through so much pain and heartache. And then all of a sudden, 1 second later, you go from facing 10 years in prison, losing everything, and then it's over.
I have the court order here. I want to read it to you. The United States of America versus Eitan David Haim. It's criminal action number H-24-298. It says the indictment and all open counts in the above listed criminal case are hereby dismissed with prejudice. I can feel a lot of emotion from the two of you just reading the court order.
Yeah, it clears his name. It made clear what we knew all along, which was that this prosecution should have never been brought in the first place.
Did the court order give you your lives back?
Yeah, and the important thing for people to know is it's dismissed with prejudice. It's a big deal because that means they can never bring the case again in the future. The only thing I want to do was just hold my baby because the biggest fear was not being there for her.
I would look at him holding her and think, oh my gosh, what if he goes to jail? What if he's not there for her growing up? And so at the end, there's this picture of him holding, Talia is her name, and holding this glass of champagne. It's this celebratory moment and just this knowledge that he's going to be there for her.
You posted, today is for celebrating, tomorrow is for accountability. What does accountability look like for you and your family?
Accountability looks like the people who did this, the agents responsible, the prosecutors responsible, being held to account for breaches of, their duties as prosecutors and agents, and also for their breaches of duty as lawyers.
They should be nowhere near a position of authority where they can use their position to target people who oppose their political agenda. Because to accuse someone of a crime and destroy everything they've ever worked for something, and in this case, for doing the right thing, is the most evil thing you can do to someone. It was because they were trying to crush us that we worked so hard to let them not crush us. And we ended up winning. It's the greatest victory of my life. I mean, it's amazing.
Was the Biden Justice Department weaponized against you and your family?
100%.
Yes, I 100%. The Biden administration had weaponized the Justice Department against us.
Was Health and Human Services weaponized against you?
Yes.
What harm was done to your family?
Huge amount of harm. I think the number one was the emotional toll that all of this took, the fear and living with all of that. And it's cost us personally to almost $2 million.
Wait, $2 million
Yes.
to defend yourself?
Yes. And that's conservative for the quality of lawyers that we have and the amount of the legal work that was required in this case. If you look at the docket entries for the court, there are hundreds of motions, and each one of those cost tens of thousands, if not sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to respond to.
Do you think bad actors in government count on the fact that most people cannot financially afford to defend themselves?
Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of the calculus that the government, it's a huge advantage that the government has.
In 2023, the Himes story went viral after Christopher Rufo posted his whistleblower account. A year earlier, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton found gender-affirming care can legally constitute child abuse under Texas family law. Texas Children's Hospital released a statement that it paused hormone-related prescription therapies for gender-affirming services, citing potential criminal legal ramifications. But Dr. Himes says the hospital's schedules indicated that the controversial treatments for minors continued.
When you took these screenshots, did you hack into the hospital system? Did you have unauthorized access?
Absolutely not. I was working in the hospital, operating as part of my residency program.
What drove you to take the screenshots?
I spent a lot of time taking care of these sick kids at Texas Children's Hospital. And everything we do is to make them healthy again. But in the same operating rooms, I find out that they're taking perfectly healthy children, right? Inserting medications into their body, putting them down this road to turn them into chronic medical patients.
I'd like you to walk us through this schedule from Texas Children's Hospital. The diagnosis code is gender dysphoria. What is gender dysphoria?
So this is the distress that people feel when they believe that their sex is different than their biological sex.
I'm looking at the ages here, 15, 13, 12, 14, 12, 11. Minors can't give consent for these procedures, so the parents are giving consent. Do you believe it's informed consent?
So I believe this is not informed consent because the informing party is the doctor. If the doctor is misinformed about the pathology they're treating and the success of the interventions, then the patients are being misinformed. And that's exactly what's happening here.
Just to be clear, this medical procedure is a surgical procedure.
Yeah, this is a surgical procedure that requires anesthesia, that requires surgical instruments, that carries surgical risks in every way.
And this non-biodegradable drug delivery implant is a puberty blocker.
Yeah, this is a very, very powerful medication.
I see the red highlighting here. Did you make those marks?
Yeah.
Why were you blocking this information?
To protect the patients, because this whole story has nothing to do with the patients, right? They're the victims. It has to do with the hospital. So I wanted to make sure to protect their identities.
What would you say to those families and children who are struggling with gender dysphoria?
I would listen to them. I think that's the most important thing. They're hurting. What they need is someone to go through that emotional pain with them, to listen to them, to tell them that they're dignified, that they're created perfect the way they are.
Because of your whistleblower activity, were you retaliated against?
Yes, I believe so. And really in a number of ways.
I'd like to walk through the reviews that were left on your medical profile online. This one says, he touched me inappropriately and was super creepy. He had no idea what he was doing, and he has no business being in medicine. He should be in jail for being a terrible physician. He mutilates patients. It sounds like you're an abuser.
And the important thing for people to know about those reviews is that they were written when I was anonymous, before I took my story public. So the person who wrote those reviews had come from inside the hospital.
These claims are backed up by criminal attorney Mark Lytle, a member of Dr. Heim's legal team.
Those are outrageous comments that they were not real, they were fake, and they were put there by someone to retaliate against Dr. Heim. We did as best we could, our own investigation, and we determined that it was coming from the hospital, the same IP address.
The government's case stood out for other reasons. Lytle says the Biden-appointed U.S. attorney, Alamdar Hamdani, circumvented long-standing Justice Department checks and balances and worked directly with Assistant U.S. Attorney Tina Ansari, who prosecuted the case. Lytle told us about a specific conversation with Ansari.
So in the 20-plus years you've been practicing law, you've never had a conversation like you did with the prosecutor?
Never. Under all the cases I've prosecuted, I was chief of the Financial Crimes and Public Corruption Unit. I supervised 15 to 17 attorneys at any given time, and we reviewed these types of things, these types of procedures. Never heard of it before.
Did the prosecutor cross a red line in the conversation?
Absolutely.
You got threats in that phone call.
Yeah, threats, essentially like, we're going to go after this guy if he doesn't come in and admit what he did was wrong. And if he doesn't do that, then he's going to get a felony, and we're going to try him on a technicality, and we don't care if we lose. And that's disturbing. That's wielding the law as a weapon. It's not trying to be on a search for truth. This case was like a freight train running down the mountainside without any brake pads on it. The prosecutor is dead set to bring this case against Dr. Heim.
2 years before Dr. Heim was indicted, the Biden administration sent this guidance from Washington, D.C. about investigating anyone who blocked or restricted gender-affirming care for minors.
This memo is from Health and Human Services, the Office of Civil Rights, and it's their notice and guidance on gender-affirming care, civil rights, and patient privacy. What message was sent by this Health and Human Services memo?
So the message from this memo is that anyone who interferes with the administration of quote-unquote gender-affirming care is going to become a target of the federal government, that they're going to use the entirety of their power and authority to target people who get in the way of their political goals.
This memo was a green light by the Biden administration to prosecutors to manipulate HIPAA in exactly the way that we're talking about.
At the heart of the government's case was a federal law called HIPAA that protects the privacy of patients and their healthcare information.
What you're alleging in this case is that the law was being used by the Justice Department to protect doctors and the hospitals.
It was shocking, and it was, trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. HIPAA is intended to protect patient privacy. It's not designed to protect billion-dollar hospital corporations, but that's what they were using it for.
On June 23, 2023, the day of his graduation, the Heims described 2 federal agents from Health and Human Services knocking on their door.
2 people standing out there, they show me their badges, tell me that they're with Health and Human Services and that they're investigating a case regarding medical records. And in that moment, I knew exactly what they were there for. And Andrea gives me one look and she says, we have to go talk privately. So we walk over to our bedroom and she tells me that we should not speak with them without an attorney present. But before they leave, they give me a target letter.
Well, I've got the target letter right here. The federal agents give you this target letter. And it says, this office is involved, that's the U.S. Attorney's Office in Texas, in an investigation dealing with federal law violations. You are a potential target in this criminal investigation. That means that you are the focus of a criminal investigation. Andrea, you know that there's serious legal risk.
So I knew the minute that we received that target letter that everything was going to change.
The target letter was signed by Assistant U.S. Attorney Tina Ansari, who Lytle says accused Andrea Heim of obstructing the investigation.
When I asked her why, it was because when Dr. Heim, when the HHS agents came to visit him and they sought a voluntary interview, Dr. Heim's wife, who is an attorney, suggested that he should wait to have an attorney before he submit to an interview. And Miss AUSA Ansari believed that was obstruction.
At that time, Andrea Heim was onboarding for her own position as a federal prosecutor in Texas.
And Sari knew that Dr. Heim's wife was freshly hired as an assistant U.S. attorney in another office and undergoing security clearance, a background check. And this is where AUSA and Sari said something that was shocking to us. She said she wasn't going to do anything about that, even though she believed it was obstruction, but she might do something if Dr. Heim's wife became difficult.
That sounds like a threat.
That's the way we took it.
Nearly a year after the target letter, federal marshals delivered the first of 3 criminal indictments for allegedly violating patient privacy laws.
The first indictment is May of 2024. The second indictment is October. The third indictment is November. What explains 3 indictments?
First of all, it is ridiculous that there are 3 indictments. This is absolutely speaking to the fact that this prosecution, they were trying any way that they could to manufacture an indictment out of non-existent law. That's why it failed.
They were going to do anything possible to make me pay for what I did, right? To try to get me to plead, to make other whistleblowers disincentivized from doing the same thing.
It says that you violated Title 42, U.S. Code, Chapter 7, Subchapter XL. I couldn't find Subchapter XL. I mean, does it exist?
It does not. It's a typo. This isn't a typo of there versus there or something like that. This is the operative language of their indictment, the name of the statute that they're charging with, and they got that wrong in multiple indictments.
I think a lot of people are going to be confused that you've got a Justice Department indictment, federal criminal charges, and it cites a law that does not exist.
Yeah, and they admitted that during a hearing, right? They had to apologize that they weren't proofreading properly.
I just think American taxpayers would want an answer about sloppy lawyering.
Yeah.
They deserve one.
I mean, consider how many resources were spent on this case alone, right? Months and months of legal work, right? You had FBI agents, prosecutors, you had the court's time, all of that.
The allegation is that you violated patient privacy. Yet when I read the indictment, the Justice Department identifies patients with their initials. Is this a violation of their privacy, yes or no?
I would say that it is.
The screenshots you took in the hospital, you redacted, you used the red highlighter to block the name of the patients. So who's violating patient privacy here?
I think there's a strong argument to make that it was the DOJ who was violating the patient's privacy, because I never released patient information. It was the Department of Justice who had released the patient's initials.
These exclusive internal emails show Dr. Heim's legal team pushed the prosecutor for evidence patient names were disclosed. His lawyer wrote, "I have not been able to find an instance where this actually happened." The prosecutor eventually sent Dr. Heim screenshots of the hospital surgery schedule, where Dr. Heim removed patient names.
To me, this is one of the most unbelievable parts of this case, is that they're charging him with accessing private patient information, but the government released more information about child patients than Eitan ever did.
As the full weight of the Biden-Harris Justice Department came down on the couple, Andrea neared her due date, and Eitan had to be in court.
What was the darkest moment?
The happiest moment of my life was the birth of my 4-month-old daughter, but it was also the scariest. And I ended up having to have an emergency C-section. Eitan had to leave the hospital room where I was with our daughter an hour after I had surgery to go to Houston for a court hearing. And at that point, we had no idea what was going to happen.
Did you have a moment when you feared for Andrea and your daughter?
Yeah, especially because whenever giving birth, if something happens, if there's any complications, it happens after. If something happened, I wouldn't be there. And that's awful.
Did you feel that you had let your wife down?
Yeah. And I knew that she understood that, it's something I had to do, right? Like,
I can see you
yeah,
choking up about it.
yeah. Because if I did, these people are going to send me to prison.
Yeah, just take a minute.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the happiest day of your life when you bring a child into the world.
Yeah. But then, especially to have my baby born, to go to trial the next day and just see these people lie, right? And just see the judge accept it. what kind of country is this, right? What kind of country are we delivering our kids into?
In late 2024, the trial date shifted multiple times. After Dr. Heim posted court records on X, the federal judge threatened a gag order.
You're facing federal criminal charges, $250,000 in fines, and then the court threatens to silence you. What's going through your head at that point?
That was by far the most painful part of this case, because what I was simply talking about was public motions. So every point I made on X in these interviews was already made by my attorneys.
I want to read some of the court transcript. It says, from the judge, if similar conduct continues, I will not hesitate to reconsider the issuing of a gag order. Furthermore, any violation of this order by the defendant, that's you, could lead to the revocation of his bond and immediate custody at a federal detention center.
And he knows that at that point, we're completely broke, completely desperate, that we have no ability to fight back, that we have to preserve our resources for trial. What I believe is his way of protecting himself, his way of protecting the DOJ from criticism, but that comes at a cost. And that cost is paid by my own constitutional rights, the rights that they took an oath to protect in that courtroom.
On the morning of January 24th, Dr. Heim was under more pressure after he called the case a kangaroo court on X, an apparent violation of the judge's instructions.
I really woke up that morning on the 24th thinking there was a 50-50 chance my husband might be going to jail.
Things were getting so desperate. The injustice had built up to the point where I couldn't stay silent any longer. So whatever these people were going to do to me, I was willing to take those consequences. I was willing to go to jail if this judge was going to throw me in jail. But the whole world would have to see what he was doing.
Was X a lifeline?
There's no doubt about that. First of all, there's no whistleblowing without X. The only reason I blew the whistle is because I believed that people would hear this story. So it was essential in the most true way possible.
Without a free X where people could, express their beliefs freely, I don't think this case would have had nearly the attention. And X agrees, because X actually intervened to protect Eitan's right to speak on their platform.
When you lay out on X the nature of what the government is accusing me of, people can see it for themselves. You open it up to public scrutiny.
Are you calling on the Trump administration to investigate your case?
Yeah, I would say absolutely.
I would say investigating is a first step, certainly. And I think, taking action against the people that did this to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Did you have a moment where you felt like you didn't recognize this America?
From the very beginning to the very end, it was every moment in between. I feel like it's not the country that I grew up in. And, maybe there were problems back then, but I feel like things were different. Having our first daughter in the middle of all this just made it that much more important, because this is the country we have now. It's unrecognizable. It's awful. But we can maybe do something about that.
I took that oath as an assistant U.S. attorney to uphold the Constitution, to respect the rights of defendants, to respect the First Amendment. These things that we hold as sacred as Americans were being weaponized against us.